By the early 1970s, Schlitz was neck and neck with Budweiser for the best-selling beer in America, 40-day lagering. Copper kettles, the beer that made Milwaukee famous. Then, its own executives swapped tradition for chemistry, and customers found cloudy, flake-filled sludge where clean lager used to be. Schlitz did not lose a war. It poisoned itself. Milwaukee's proudest brewing monument fell silent. To understand how, you have to understand what was lost. In 1849, Milwaukee was a city of brick and timber, thick with the scent of malt and wood smoke. On Chestnut Street, August Krug's small brewery stood as a neighborhood anchor. Barrels rolled out by the hundreds each year, each one the result of slow, careful work. Grain came from Wisconsin fields. Water was drawn from deep beneath the city, and hops perfumed the air in autumn. Krug's death in 1856 left the business in the hands of Joseph Schlitz, a German bookkeeper whose name would soon eclipse his own. Schlitz married Anna Maria Krug in 1858 and took up the task of turning a family brewery into something more enduring. By 1868, Schlitz had his eye on Chicago, opening an agency to serve the growing city just across the lake. Then, in October 1871, the Great Chicago Fire swept through the city, leveling breweries and leaving saloons dry. Schlitz moved quickly, shipping barrels by the trainload to parched taverns. That single act more than doubled his sales in a year and fixed the beer's reputation as a lifeline, pure, reliable, and generous in crisis. As demand grew, so did the operation. In 1870, a new brewery rose at 3rd and Walnut, its copper kettles gleaming in the morning sun, its steam clouding the Milwaukee skyline. By the 1890s, the complex sprawled over city blocks, a monument to both immigrant hustle and the patience of tradition. Schlitz beer was stored in cool cellars and aged for weeks, allowing flavors to mellow and unwanted haze to settle out. No shortcuts, no chemical tricks. Even the bottles reflected a stubborn attention to quality. Brown glass, introduced in the late 19th century, shielded the beer from sunlight, guarding it against the skunking that ruined lesser brews. Every detail, from the grain bill to the storage time, was a promise to the drinker. This was the beer that made Milwaukee famous. Trust was built pint by pint, not by slogans, but by the taste and clarity in every glass. By the middle of the 20th century, the name Schlitz had become inseparable from the city that built it. Smokestacks rose over Milwaukee's north side, pouring out the scent of boiling wort and roasted malt. The brewery complex sprawled for blocks, a living engine of copper, brick, and steam, fueled by the hands of thousands of workers whose fathers and grandfathers had done the same. In taverns and corner bars from the Great Lakes to the Gulf Coast, bartenders pulled tap handles marked with the signature script. Each glass poured was more than a drink. It was a badge of blue-collar pride, a small reward at the end of a long shift. Schlitz didn't just sell beer. It sold the idea of honest work and dependable refreshment, bottled and shipped to every state. The phrase, "the beer that made Milwaukee famous," appeared on billboards, matchbooks, and neon signs. A boast that was as much about the city's reputation as it was about the liquid itself. By the 1950s, Schlitz had traded the top spot with Anheuser-Busch, sometimes holding the crown as the largest brewery in the world. The Uihlein family, stewards since the 1870s, presided over this empire with a combination of old-world caution and American ambition. Their names were spoken with a mix of reverence and envy in the industry, guardians of a process that still respected the slow patience of lagering, the cool cellars, and the careful blend of barley and hops. The company's advertisements leaned into this legacy. Black and white photos showed workers in aprons and caps, lifting barrels with a practiced ease. Radio jingles promised a beer that was pure, hearty, and above all, trustworthy. Schlitz was the beer at the bowling alley, the family picnic, the neighborhood wedding. It was the taste of Friday night paychecks and Sunday afternoon baseball, an unspoken contract between brewer and drinker that what came out of the bottle would be as honest as the men and women who made it. Yet behind the scenes, the pedestal was already wobbling. The very success that made Schlitz an icon also made it a target for rivals and for its own ambitions. The pressure to defend the top spot grew year by year, and with it, subtle changes began to ripple through the boardroom. But on the brewery floor, the copper kettles still shone, the foam still crowned each glass, and Milwaukee's workers still believed that what they were building would last forever. By the early 1970s, the air inside the Milwaukee brewhouse no longer smelled only of barley and hops. Something sharper crept in. It was the sterile logic of efficiency. At the head of the long boardroom table, Robert Uihlein Jr. studied the ledgers. The numbers told a story of shrinking margins, rising costs, and a relentless race against Anheuser-Busch. The old ways, 40 days of lagering in cool cellars, barley from local fields, and hops that perfumed the city, were now seen as liabilities, not points of pride. The new order arrived with a memo: cut time, cut cost, boost output. Accelerated batch fermentation, called ABF, slashed conditioning from over a month to as little as 15 days. Barley malt gave way to corn syrup, cheaper and quicker to ferment. Fresh hops were replaced by pellets and extracts. Each change shaved off pennies per barrel, and each one loosened the bond between brewer and beer. On the brewery floor, the old-timers watched the clockwork of tradition break apart. The yeast did not have time to finish its work. Proteins and polyphenols, once allowed to settle gently in the lagering tanks, now hung suspended in the rush to market. The beer turned cloudy when chilled, a haze that no slogan could hide. Accountants saw a problem of appearance. The solution came in 50-pound sacks marked silica gel. Poured into the tanks, the powder scavenged the haze, forming proteins, binding them for removal in the filters. But clarity came at a cost. The foam, once thick and creamy, began to collapse. Another fix followed: alginate, a seaweed extract, added for head retention. It kept the bubbles alive, at least for a while. Each intervention was a patch, not a cure. By 1975, the recipe was a tangle of shortcuts and chemical tricks. Each new ingredient meant to compensate for the last. The brewmaster's art had become a technical chain reaction, managed by men in suits who rarely set foot on the brewery floor. The beer still looked clear in the bottle, but the foundation had shifted. The promise that built Schlitz, the taste, the feel, the trust, was now balanced on a knife edge of chemistry and compromise. Floaties. The word itself became a curse in Milwaukee taverns and grocery aisles by the late 1970s. Bottles that once promised clarity and pride now revealed a slow drift of white flakes, mucus-like clumps swirling in the golden lager. The cause was not sabotage from a rival, but a chain of decisions made in boardrooms far from the copper kettles. Accelerated fermentation left proteins adrift. Silica gel, meant to scavenge haze, stripped out the very proteins that once crowned a glass with FOAM. Then came the chemical fix, a seaweed extract called kelkaloid, added to fake the lost head. But when it met the new anti-haze agent Chill Guard, the result was a visible failure: protein flakes, irreversible, floating in every 10th bottle. By 1976, complaints poured in from coast to coast. Distributors demanded answers. Bartenders poured full cases down the drain. The company's response was not confession, but deflection. Management blamed dirty glasses and careless storage, insisting the beer was safe even as the evidence swirled before every customer's eyes. Quietly, Schlitz authorized a recall: 10 million bottles and cans pulled from shelves at a cost of $1.4 million. There was no public admission, only a silent retreat. The trust that had built Schlitz, pint by pint, began to dissolve. desperation set in. A new ad campaign in 1977 called "Drink Schlitz or I'll Kill You" landed that year, lumberjacks and boxers barking threats instead of promises. The tone was all wrong, alienating the very drinkers who once wore Schlitz as a badge of blue-collar honor. Sales collapsed. By 1981, the Milwaukee brewery floor, once alive with the roar of boilers and the hum of conveyors, fell silent as 700 union workers walked out in a bitter strike. The plant never reopened. In June 1982, Stroh bought Schlitz for a fraction of its former value, inheriting a brand stripped of its soul. The monument was gone, and with it, the taste of honest reward at the end of a long shift. Today, the copper kettles are silent, and the air holds no malted sweetness. Trust, once bottled, poured, and shared, vanished with the foam. You can engineer costs out of a beer, but you cannot engineer trust back in. The soul of a product is never just a line item.